And I'm talking. I'll be talking with Gary Govel of the Collector Syndicate. He is a he's local to the Albany area, and um, he's from what I've never met him, but we've touched base a couple times, and he's big into the grading and getting signatures, which is something that I'm very unfamiliar with. So I'm going to bring him on, and we're going to just kind of talk with him and see if he can tell us a little bit about his how he got into the hobby, and what he how he pursues his comic book hobbies. All right, here he is. Hey,
Hey, thanks for having me.
oh, thanks for being here. So first off, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into comics? What was the first one you read? Do you remember?
Sure. I can't say I specifically remember the first thing I read, but I know I still own stuff from when I was 7 or 8 years old. I mean, I have, you know, Hulk 182, so the third appearance of Wolverine. I have that came out in 1976 or whatever. Like Invaders one, approximately the same time frame. So I have stuff from when I was 6, 7, 8 years old. So I mean, a lot of the old Marvel stuff, that I still have. I know, I kind of recall having stuff before that, but those are some of the things that I still own, from back then. Let me think what else. X-Men 96. So, early in the new X-Men run, I still have the copy, of that I originally purchased. So, some old stuff that I've had for, decades now. So it's, nice to still have stuff that I bought off a spinner rack back then.
So are there any, you've mentioned a lot of Marvel, titles. Were there any characters or creators that you tend to follow, or?
Again, I would say back then, with the Marvel stuff, I would say, I gravitated more towards Marvel back then because the continuity was a little easier for me to follow, at that age. With DC, I was reading some stuff, but there was some Justice Society stuff, some Justice League stuff, some Freedom Fighter stuff. They were all basically in different different Earths or whatever. So it was kind of it was easier for me to pick up on some of the Marvel stuff, to be honest with you, back then. So that was any of the pre-crisis straightening out or attempts to straighten stuff out. But like I said, Marvel stuff was just an easier grab for me. I would say, back then, again, I kind of grew up through the, Chris Claremont, Dave Cockrum, John Byrne, X-Men era. So I was, really into that at the time. I have, quite a few of the George Perez, John Byrne, Avengers, some of the Spider-Man from that era. So, primarily the Marvel stuff. With DC, I found myself, even going through my stuff now, I have a lot of the DC horror stuff, Ghost, Unknown, House of Mystery, that type of stuff. So it's just, I think, again, maybe I shied away from some of the, DC continuity at the time, but, got into some of that stuff, the horror related stuff. The other thing, talking about DC that I think I have from that time frame is kind of the standalone type stuff, like like DC Comics Presents or stuff like that, where again I didn't need to know the entire continuity just to be able to read and enjoy a story, basically, or Brave and the Bold, those type of things.
So I think I first found out about your website is relatively new, Collector Syndicate, correct?
Yeah, and I really. So I really, it's probably a year or so old, but I really, again, I was kind of, heavily into, comics and collecting everything. And then, life gets in the way and I wasn't really buying things over the years. So I was still, following major storylines, and I was still, keeping up with, the media and the websites, all that kind of stuff, following the storylines and everything. I was reading some things through, trade paperbacks in libraries or, some online stuff, but, I wasn't buying stuff. So then, in recent years, as I've, gotten back into it, I was just kind of, started blogging about some of the stuff that I've been doing collecting wise. As you mentioned, some of the grading stuff that I can talk about. And really, I guess I'm at the point where I'm trying to kind of consolidate my collection. What's the stuff that I want to keep? What's the stuff that I perhaps want to get rid of? Maybe add some things that I didn't own before or upgrade some things. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Let me just bring up this the site so we can, as we're talking about it. Well, hey, there it is. So tell me about the site. What do you have on there? Because I think the first time we actually interacted was it was after Free Comic Book Day, and you contacted me to see if you could use a couple of my videos from when I went around to the local stores that day.
Sure. So really, again, I'm just kind of writing about any of the stuff that I've been doing. I mean, there's a couple of things up there now about stuff that I, sold through eBay or whatever, but really the stuff that I've been doing is some of the stuff that have gotten graded or, books that have gotten signed at, New York Comic Con or other shows. I've kind of blogged about those experiences, meeting the creators who signed the books, as well as kind of, the mail call when the stuff has come back from, CGC, the grading company. So just kind of sharing the results of that. So that's a lot of what I've been doing. I've got a couple Q&A, interviews up there. Rich Hen is a facilitator for CGC. So he's basically, he's really a comics dealer, but he can get books signed and bring them from, show to show to have additional signatures added to it and still retain the, authorized witness status of the book, because any of the books I'm having signed, there has to be a witness there, observing it to maintain the chain of custody. So, and I have a couple I can show you as we proceed here, but the stuff
Sure.
that I have here is through CGC. I also have some books out with CBCS, one of the other grading companies, so some stuff signed with them as well. So those are really two companies. So a few things that are on there now are, like I said, kind of the mail call, like unboxing type stuff where I'm showing the results of it. Just some of the experiences that I have had. I saw one of the pictures that just scrolled by was Jim Lee and Scott Williams and Alex Sinclair. I had, at New York Comic Con last year, I won one of the spots to, have that signing. So I had a copy of Batman 619, the last issue of the Hush series, signed by all three of them. And that's out with CBCS right now being graded. So once you get that back, I'll share that on the site as well.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, because I have a few graded books. I mean, I bought them like years ago, and so I know about it, but I'm really not that well versed in it, and the whole grading process. Can you kind of talk about that for a little bit, or?
Sure. And again, I'm sure there's people that could get into this a lot deeper than I can, but I've been using, the two companies I mentioned, CGC and CBCS. So basically, when you send the books to them, they grade the book, they examine the front cover, back cover, interior, count the pages, make sure, the book is, complete and intact. And then, they assign a grade to the book. And again, one of the things I've really been doing is trying to identify stuff that I've owned for, 30, 40 years or more, that appears to be high quality, I think will, grade out well and have that stuff graded. So when, you send the book to one of the companies, again, they grade it, they assess, grade and encapsulate it in plastic. So, once it's graded, unless you bust it out of there, you're not going to be reading it again. So, any of the stuff that I have, it's stuff, again, that I've personally owned and largely read. So I mean, I can show you an example of a couple of things.
Sure.
How it'll come out, but so if we'd see this, this first appearance of Hobgoblin and Amazing Spider-Man from 1983 or thereabouts. So again, this is my originally purchased copy, and this came out as a graded as a 9.2. So you can see it's encased in plastic, to preserve the integrity of it and protect the book. They're not watertight or anything like that, so you still have to be careful with the moisture and stuff like that. But
so they're not the books you're breaking out to read under quarantine, right?
Correct. For that, I've been hitting more, either online or a couple trade paperbacks or stuff like that. That's what
Right.
I've been reading now.
So, um, tell me about the signing at the cons. I think, am I right that New York Con was your first time there? Or last year was
Uh,
your first time at New York Con?
yeah, so it was my first time at New York Comic Con. Yeah, because again, I had kind of been out of it for a while, and it's came back into it. So I mean, I took the train down from Albany. I was just there for the day, so I mean, it was a easy in and out to from Rensselaer to Penn Station. But I just brought down a selection of stuff. Again, my goal was to get stuff signed by the creators that were there. So and again, I can share a couple of those things that I did
Sure.
get signed. But I basically just brought a courier bag with the stuff in it, and I kind of had a plan A, and I probably ended up closer to plan C or D when all was said and done, from crowds and lines and everything else. But I was really happy with a couple of the results. And again, there's some things I was disappointed with, some things that I was very happy with. So that's really how it ends up, and I guess that's life during the COVID-19 crisis. So make the best of what you have.
So you said you got some stuff signed. You had some stuff signed by
Sure.
Jim Lee, and did you get to see him sign it? Did you get to talk to him? How does that kind of? I know you said you won a lottery. How does that really work? I mean, do you get to ask him questions while he's doing that, or
there wasn't really a lot of opportunity for exchange, but I did get a chance to meet him, say hello. There wasn't in this situation not a lot of opportunity for exchange. Some of the other people that I can mention did were a little more talkative. But for the thing with Jim Lee, Scott Williams, and Alex Sinclair, it was at the DC booth or thereabouts. So they really had it pretty organized. I mean, you just went through and they signed the stuff and you moved on. But it was it was a good experience, and to have the opportunity to meet three guys that are so influential in the industry was a great opportunity for me. Again, that's Batman 619. I had signed, and that's out now. I will say, so one of the other things that I can show you here that I did get signed, Chris Claremont, he is very, he was very communicative and engaging with, all the fans. So what I have that he had, again, my originally purchased copy of X-Men 141, the first part of Days of Future Past. So that's signed by Chris Claremont at the show. And I had him sign a couple other things that he talked about. There's one X-Men cover with Captain America, and Wolverine, and Black Widow, and it's like, oh, they should make a movie out of that. It's the current actors in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So it's he was very engaging. Some of the other guys were as well too. So again, it's they vary on their level of interaction, especially at a show like that. There's so many people there that they're dealing with all day long. I'm sure it would wear on me, so I'm sure it wears on them as well. But they do a great job.
So how does the having the comics, autographed and verified, how does that affect does that affect the grading grade that it gets, or
so what happens is, if the signatures were witnessed as these were, they put a different label on it. So these, you can see it's a yellow label here. That means that this book was witnessed by a CGC, authorized witness. So that doesn't affect the grade. If it was an unwitnessed signature with CGC, it could result in a hit to the grade, or they'll put a green label on it, basically indicating that there's some sort of defect. So any of the books that I have here, that were witnessed, they have the yellow label on it. CBCS, the other company I mentioned with, Jim Lee, those signatures, they did not allow witnesses at that event because, it was, free and a prize, through a lottery. So they didn't allow the witnesses there. So CBCS, the other company I mentioned, does basically post signature verification of the signatures. So so that's what I'm shooting for, that they're actually going to verify the signatures through whatever handwriting software or comparisons that they do. So, hopefully that'll come back, all verified, since, I did have it done in person. So I'm pretty confident it will. But and again, the Spider-Man book I showed a second ago, that's got a blue label, and that means that's what they consider the universal label. It's unsigned and standard grading.
So I've talked to somebody. I believe they were at the Empire Con last year, Empire State Con. Yeah. It was the not CGC, but the other one you were mentioning. Is there a difference between the two companies on how they grade? Are they similar?
Yeah, people have, preferences one way or the other. I think, CGC was basically the first company doing this, and they have the biggest market share. I mean, there's some people that are strictly loyal to one or the other. So the guy who basically started CGC is now the president of CBCS. So I think there's probably some, consistency between the two. But again, I mean, like Coke or Pepsi, I mean, some people like one more than the other. But okay. Again, I'm trying my hand at both and, see what the experiences are. It even comes down to, some people like one company's label more than the other or something like that. It's just kind of interesting.
I was just wondering if they tended to have different, grading, a different grading scale as to what they would consider, what one would consider like, a plus. The other one would say something like that would be a ding to the score.
Sure. I know there's been stories that CBCS tends to grade a little stricter than CGC, but I can't tell you, definitively that is true. And again, there's people who, are fans of one company more than the other that might actually buy a book that's already graded and have it cracked open and graded by the other company. And you can read online. And, sometimes it stays the same. Sometimes it goes down 0.2 of a point. Sometimes it goes up. So,
right.
I think there is variation.
That's one thing I've always wanted to do, but just never had the time or the money to do, is have a book, get it, have somebody I know a guy who is really, he used to own a comic book shop, and he's a pretty tough grader, and then send it around, and that's a lot of work.
Yeah. And even by sending it around, you never know what's going to happen to it. Like, is it being affected? Is it getting dinged? Through the mail, and the additional handling. So and even the grading in itself is subjective. Like, I mean, I have things that came back at 9.4 or 9.6 that look just as good as these things that have been graded 9.8. And 9.8 is really the standard where, the value goes up as far as the, resale market.
So are there any creators that you still would like to get stuff graded from? Are there any, I guess, Grail books that you have?
Yeah. It's kind of funny because I go back and forth. Like, I was at a Terrificon in Connecticut last August, and I had a lot of stuff signed there, and I had the Infinity Gauntlet #1 signed by Starlin, Ron Lim, and Joe Rubenstein, and George Perez was supposed to be there, but due to his health issues, he was not able to attend. So it would have been great to have his signature added to that. But again, unfortunately, couldn't be there. Some of these guys do like mail-in signings where there are companies or individual dealers or facilitators that will arrange for their signatures. So I've kind of bounced that around. But again, one of the I mentioned with these graded books, where if something comes back graded 9.8, the value spikes. The Infinity Gauntlet that I mentioned came back rated 9.8. So I'm not going to basically have that book cracked open to have another signature added to it, because I'm afraid, it would get dinged and, go down in grade. So I'm just going to sit on it the way it is. Excuse me for 1 second. Even I mentioned at, the Terrificon in Connecticut, I had with me a copy of X-Men 50, the green cover by Steranko with Polaris on the cover. I had that with me, but I basically, was kind of basically sick of waiting in line, so I didn't end up, having it signed. But now, in retrospect, I might be, a Silver Age book like that, is a pretty in demand book. I might prefer to just keep it as is and not have it signed. So I would like to get his signature on something, but that book I might keep the way it is. So, so it all depends. Even in at New York Comic Con, I had some stuff, for Eric Larson to sign, but again, just the scheduling didn't work out to, get his signature. So, like I said, I just bring a bunch of stuff with me and with a plan A, and we'll see how it falls.
So I was, as I was looking through your site, and it just scrolled by that you wrote a piece about, and you've mentioned it kind of as we've been talking, but collecting during this time where we're quarantined. There's a pandemic, and the comic book industry has kind of, at this time, it's stalled. Do you want to share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously been a tough time for those that are making a living in the industry. I mean, I'm a hobbyist, collector, fan, but my livelihood doesn't depend on this. But the stores and even some of the creators who have had their work halted at this time. I think it takes a hit on a lot of people. So I think I've tried to support the store where I typically buy stuff from, either through I bought a trade paperback, boards and bags, whatever else I can do to help support them during this time. But again, I mentioned like even during this time, just for entertainment purposes, trade paperbacks, like Marvel Unlimited had some free stuff, during this time. So I was reading that. But I think again, the stores have taken a significant hit, between originally, the social distancing and the I guess the restrictions that states put in place, and then Diamond ceasing distribution. Again, for these people whose livelihood depends on it, it's could really jeopardize their business. So I think anything we can do to support them is important at this time.
So, what is your current? What is your take on the fact? Like, I doubt that New York Comic Con is going to happen. How do you see that this affecting the comic book uh, industry that way? I mean, not only do you have to worry about the people who are attending, but you also have to worry about the people the creative people who would probably be meeting people, and there's always talk of the con crud.
Right. I think certainly, I mean, just when you see a mass of people like that at a show like the Javits Center, I can't anticipate that stuff like that happening, again, anytime soon. I think, any mass gatherings like that are going to be limited. I mentioned that, some of the stuff that I've been doing, getting books signed. I mean, some of these companies are doing, mail away signings with some of the creators. So, I mean, there are opportunities for like that. But like you said, even when some of the shows start running again, it does seem like there's going to be changes to the way, some of this business occurs. Either there's going to be a middleman handing the stuff off to them, or but I think there's going to be some sort of changes that will happen.
So you've been to the Albany Con, correct?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Okay. And
one thing I was going to mention about that is, I guess, approximately a year ago, there's a story about it on my site, but when I was 10 years old, I went to a show at a local library that Joe Sinnott was there. And again, this is 1977 or thereabouts. So, Joe was there, did a presentation on, working in the comic industry. And when we were waiting in the parking lot of the library to leave, he basically came out And, for the 5 of us that were still waiting there, he sketched for us in the parking lot. So I have on my website, there's a sketch of the Human Torch that he did for me. And there was, I think, a Nova that he did for my brother. So I have pictures of those on the website. So last year, again, approximately about this time, I went to the Albany Comic Con and brought that picture. I got a picture with Joe, with that sketch that he did for me 40 years ago. So I thought that was pretty cool. That the guy's done so much for this hobby, and just to be able to share that with him, I still had it. Meant so much to me. So it was a nice opportunity.
So just as we wrap up here, why don't you just let everybody know where they can go to find your website and what they can find there, and just if you're reading anything that you recommend, then
Sure. My website is www.collectorsyndicate.com. And again, I'm just blogging about kind of what I'm doing with my collection, whether it's a couple of random reviews, or it's more so about the stuff that I've been grading and having signed and stuff like that. Though I have done a couple Q&A, basically written interviews with people from the industry. Excuse me. I need your coffee mug to rinse my mouth out. So again, it's really just I'm blogging about whatever I'm doing in the hobby. And on Instagram and Twitter, similarly, if you search for Collector Syndicate, you should find it. And also eBay, I'm on eBay as Collector Syndicate, just selling some.
Well, I'll include the links here when I put the video up. But I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with us, and stay safe, stay healthy.
You too, thank you. And these coughs were not part of any illness.
All right.
I need a drink of water. So.
All right. Well, you have a good evening.
Thanks. You too. Stay healthy. Right. See you. Bye.